This world has been invaded by crappy sound quality and uncomfortable earbud designs. And there's only one thing that can save us. Maximize your workout experience with Raycon's new and improved everyday earbuds. This new upgraded model has all new features, which include active noise cancellation, a new ergonomic design to comfortably fit your ears, even if you have strange ears like I do, and a quick charge function. So if you forget to charge your Raycons the night before, you can make up for it with a quick 10-minute charge that'll yield up to 90 minutes of battery life. I've always listened to a wide variety of music during my workouts, and ever since Raycon sponsored my channel, I've experienced firsthand just how good their sound quality is compared to the other brands I've used over the years. These new everyday earbuds are an improvement to an already great product. So click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/522 and get 15% off your Raycon purchase, plus free shipping. And a big thanks to Raycon for continuing to support independent creators like me. This happened about a year ago, during a winter camping trip to Kentucky. My girlfriend at the time and 3 of my friends spent the weekend doing some hiking and camping. We drove in on a Friday night around midnight and set up camp. There was almost no one else at this campsite, aside from a young couple a bit down the road from us, and an older man up the other way. We unloaded the cars in the dark, got out our lanterns, and began setting up the tents. All of a sudden, my girlfriend noticed that there was someone else with us. It was the young woman from the campsite down the road. She looked really messed up. She had a glazed over look in her eyes, and her skin looked like she had been picking at it constantly. She introduced herself and spoke in a very monotonous way. Overall, she seemed nice, but it was her boyfriend who really creeped us out. After talking with her for a bit, we noticed that he was standing near our campsite at the edge of the forest, just staring at us. Eventually he returned to his campsite, but then came back in his car, pulling up right next to us with his high beams on. As you can imagine, getting blasted by high beams at midnight in the middle of the forest really impairs your ability to see. The woman said that she had to go and joined him in the car. At this point, we were all weirded out, but not quite alarmed yet. Later that night, things got intense. I was in the tent with my girlfriend when we began to hear the couple down the road arguing. It soon escalated into full-on screaming. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking. At this point, my girlfriend and I were sitting up, deciding if we should go out and do something. We then hear someone get into a car. The car then peels out of the campsite and races down the road, kicking up dirt and gravel against our tents. The guy had apparently left his girlfriend in the camp because we could all still hear her sobbing. My girlfriend and I began to get dressed so we could go check out the situation. But the car comes tearing back up the road and parks at the campsite. Loud shouting ensues, and we clearly hear 2 pops that sound exactly like gunshots. I remember feeling the blood draining from my face. My girlfriend and I were basically frozen in our tent, carefully listening to what was going on outside. Finally, to our relief, we both hear the arguing start again. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, it finally settles down, and we fall asleep. When we woke up, they were gone. I asked my friends if they heard what happened, and they said it kept them up as well. We made breakfast and started packing up when the older man from the opposite way walked over and began chatting with us. He seemed surprised that my girlfriend was with me, and he said something along the lines of, "You shouldn't have brought her along with you. It ain't safe for a woman out here." Needless to say, we were officially creeped out, and we looked for a new area of the park to stay in. We found a lovely lakeside campsite and stayed there the following night and enjoyed the rest of our trip. But we were all certainly jarred by this experience. This happened to myself and a close friend of mine just last month. We are both 23-year-old men. We decided to go on a 2-day camping trip to the Adirondack Mountains in New York. We are both very comfortable being outdoors and have spent a lot of time camping, hunting, fishing, etc. We hiked about 5 miles to a small lake and set up camp on a small embankment. This is not a heavily trafficked area, and we didn't expect to run into anyone. After we set up camp and were sitting around a small fire that we made, we saw a flashlight moving on the other side of the lake. This was around 10:30. This was fairly unusual, but we weren't too worried about it. However, as time went on, this beam of light kept moving around the lake, getting closer to our campsite. We kept discussing who could possibly be wandering around the woods in the middle of the night, and we would prefer not to have an unwelcomed guest. Once it became obvious that the person, or people, were heading for our campsite, we moved off into some nearby trees to see who wandered up. I took a small hatchet with me, and my friend had a .22 rifle. Now, we weren't expecting trouble, and we certainly didn't want to cause any, but we figured that we might as well cover our bases. Now the moment of truth. The flashlight comes near our fire. And a man steps into view. He has a beard and was probably around his mid-40s. The scary part was, he was holding what turned out to be a pump-action shotgun. He walked around the campsite a few times, and then proceeded to enter our tent. After rummaging around for a minute or so, he came out and began yelling, "I know you're out here. Why don't you come out and say hello?" My friend and I remained motionless under the trees about 50 yards away. That's when this man proceeded to fire his shotgun into the woods, not too far from where we were. He also swung his flashlight around several times, trying to locate us. After what felt like hours, he grabbed my friend's backpack and a few articles of clothing we had drying off near the fire and threw them in to burn. My friend, who had his .22 rifle trained at the man, asked me if he should take the shot. I told him absolutely not, unless he spots us and begins pointing his gun in our direction. Thankfully, the man moved off from where he came from after a while. We waited until his flashlight was on the other side of the lake before running out, grabbing everything that we could fit in my backpack, and took off. It was now around 2 or 3 a.m. We ran out of that trail with flashlights and made it back to my car just as the sun was coming up. We immediately drove to the police department and reported it, where we also spoke with some forest rangers. We haven't heard anything from the police since then. It isn't exactly a mystery as to what happened. We encountered some lunatic in the forest, but nevertheless, This experience has creeped the hell out of us both. Ever since I was a teenager, I have spent many summer and fall weekends in Utah's Uinta Mountains, camping, fishing, backpacking, and hiking. Part of this east-west trending range is designated as wilderness and is adorned with 10,000 feet plus peaks and countless lakes. Every summer I take at least 2 trips into this area to backpack and go fishing in the lakes for trout. This area is intersected by a few roads and a network of numerous trails. The weekends bring in the urban Utah crowds, and the trails can become packed. However, the weekdays are a bit slower, and you can usually have a lake to yourself. This event took place on a weekday. The wilderness portion of this range has always been a bit creepy to me. No matter where I go in the high Uintas, I always feel like I'm being watched. The stunning beauty of the area keeps me coming back and outweighs the feeling of dread I sometimes have there. My friends and I decided to hike up the Q-Brant Basin area. There are several lakes close together, and the fishing was rumored to be pretty good. This basin gained unfortunate notoriety several years ago, when a 12-year-old Boy Scout went missing without a trace. After walking a quarter mile back to his campsite, he disappeared. A massive search was initiated. Hundreds of locals combed the area, and not a sign of the kid was found. I've always thought he was abducted, but the rough terrain and cold temperatures were ultimately blamed. With that kid's disappearance, and the aforementioned unsettling feeling of the area weighed on my mind, I was slightly apprehensive about choosing this lake as our destination. However, this would be a short trip and was a relatively easy hike. 3 miles there, 3 miles back. And it was one of the only lakes that we hadn't visited that also fit into our time frame. We hiked in and spent 2 nights there. The time at the lake went by without incident. We had the whole place to ourselves and didn't encounter another soul for the 2 days that we were there. It was a great time. However, we did run into someone on our way back. Part of the trail went up and over a land peninsula that sort of jutted out from the side of the mountain. The trail elevated 200 feet up a rock formation. You had to travel for a short time on flat ground through some pines, and then descended back down 200 feet through a rock field on the other side. This portion of the trail was the steepest, so we took some time to rest on top of the peninsula. I should also add that we had a dog roaming free out in front of us the entire time. After we descended through the boulders and down the other side, I happened to look back up the trail. What I saw really creeped me out. There was a figure standing behind a large rock located next to the trail. It seemed to be watching us as we descended. As soon as he realized I saw him, he ducked back behind the boulder. At first I tried to brush this off and rationalize as to why he was here. We weren't that far from a main trail. It wasn't that strange to see somebody else out here. Perhaps we had caught him off guard. The only distinguishing features I remember about the man was that he was bald and didn't seem to be wearing a backpack or any kind of hiking gear. I took a few more steps and turned around to look again, and just like before, I saw the man duck back behind a rock, but this time, he was a lot closer. I thought maybe I was seeing things, so I alerted the others in my group as to what was going on. We all looked back at the same time and caught him hiding once again, and this time, he was even closer. It was almost as if he was trying to follow us without us knowing. At this point, everyone was freaking out, and we picked up our pace and hightailed it back to the truck, never looking back. Perhaps it was just my eerie predisposition of the area, that made this encounter scarier than it actually was. For all I know, it could have been just some random guy messing with us, but everyone else in my group were frightened as well, and we had lots of questions. Why didn't we see him as we traversed that portion of the trail? Why didn't our dogs see him? Why was he hiding? And why was he trying to follow us? After getting home and doing some research, I discovered that we were camping in the exact same area where the 12-year-old Boy Scout disappeared. That realization and the experience of the man following us made me vow to never go back to that basin ever again. There's always a reason to be afraid.